It's my moment now to say a few words about our keynote speaker for 2006 and the 10th anniversary of the Women in Sports Business Symposium, and we're really ecstatic when we learned very early on in the planning process that Leanne Daly was willing to come out to Eugene to spend a few days with us once again. You have her bio in front of you. I'll just say a few extra words about her. Leanne Daly served as Executive Vice President of Marketing at ESPN beginning in April 2004 and semi-retired, I guess you could call it, in the fall of last year. In her role at ESPN, she was responsible for the development, direction, and implementation of all branding, creative services, and marketing for ESPN's growing media businesses encompassing television, print, radio, the internet, and all outdoor advertising. Daly and her team were responsible for the development or enhancement of over 50 campaigns annually, including This Is SportsCenter, and most recently Without Sports, which celebrates the role of sport in society. In 2004, she also oversaw the development of ESPN's ongoing Season of the Fan campaign as part of the ESPN's 25th anniversary effort. She also played an important role in the successful development of ESPN's original entertainment. Prior to ESPN, Daly was Senior Vice President and General Manager of Global New Communications, founded the comedy radio-based agency Are These My Shoes? And she began her career in 1984 as an account manager at Gray Advertising after graduating from the Indiana University School of Journalism. And she also, as you note in her bio, made time to get a degree from the French Culinary Institute. And she is not responsible for the finger food at the reception after her speech today. A recipient of numerous awards and honors for her work, including another one that we'll hand out a little later on tonight. She is considered by all in the industry as one of the most influential women in sports business. She's also a very proud mother of two, and still, as we found out with a lot of the interaction with our students over the last 24 hours, still an ardent sports fan, which is the core of her business acumen and also the core of the ESPN sports brand. It is my distinct honor to welcome to the podium as our keynote speaker for the 10th anniversary of the Women in Sports Business Symposium, Leanne Daly.
Thank you, Paul. That was very nice. I'm going to actually start by rolling a tape. Really, more than anything, a tape that shows the love that ESPN feels for women who play sports. Because, as I'll say a little bit later, we absolutely are betting on women's sports on ESPN. And let's just let that roll, and then I'll do the keynote thing. First of all, it's really great to be invited back to outrageously gorgeous Eugene, Oregon. I don't know why, but every time I come here, it's just like the Garden of Eden. So I'm very happy to be here. It puts me in a really good mood, as good weather usually does. And I love this event because it brings together so many people who are sports fans who've taken that passion that they feel for sports, and they've taken it seriously enough to try to make it their life's work. And I just think that's cool because there's so many inspirational examples of people who did that and succeeded. So it's exciting to see people continuing to sort of try to do that and figure it out. For me, my time at ESPN was amazing. I mean, I got to have so much fun doing my job, you know. And so, I mean, that's the promise of a career in sports, is to have fun and to do something you're naturally passionate about. You know, for me, we were serving sports fans, speaking their language, and always looking for the next meaningful, cool way to to try to make a connection with them across all of our media platforms, whether it was, TV, print, radio, the internet, over mobile phones now, and through a variety of consumer products that we launched, as well as, experiences like the ESPN Zone or ESPN The Weekend down at Disney. I got to be part of launching businesses that were all sports businesses in all of those different areas. And I still almost can't believe that I got to have that experience. And I feel like what I learned from that is just there are enormous possibilities that if you just sort of give them credence and believe in them and work on them, if you guys have ideas inside the sports business, you should try to write business plans and pitch them, because those dreams basically become things like ESPN and Nike and Lara Bar. They really do. It's just by having faith that those things happen, and by sticking to it and sticking with what other people feel that you feel too. So, for me, the very notion of sports as a business as a kid growing up, based on me saying it's unbelievable that I got to do all this stuff, the very notion of being able to make a living in the sports business when I was growing up was something I could have never dreamed of, because nobody was really making a lot of money unless you were a star athlete. And for me, I was a really crappy kickball player, which was the only competitive girls sport that anybody was playing in Indiana. And I played 8 seasons of CYO, Catholic Youth Organization kickball, and I was third string all 8 seasons. Okay? I love being on the team. And that's really what motivates a lot of people, because that experience of being part of a community, of a team. But, for me, growing up, too, there were exactly 0 24/7 sports news and information services. That sports news was maybe 2 minutes at the end of a broadcast. And, as far as women in sports are concerned, the only woman in sports that I ever saw in those days was Marge Schott, and I don't know if you guys know who Marge Schott was, but she was kind of infamous. And she inherited her position in sports through marriage. So, it was sort of like one of those things that I could have never imagined. So, in short, in my youth in Indiana, unless you were like, Chris Everett or Billie Jean, who frankly is responsible for everything you just saw up there, I think, making an actual living wage in a career in sports was unimaginable, and jobs were limited to titles like coach and athletic director. And those jobs were practiced at the same time as paying careers. My next door neighbor, Ken Partridge, who will be retiring as a golf coach after 40 years of coaching Division IV golf, used to tell me as a kid that, you don't expect to make a living in sports. You expect to go in the hole. You're paying out of your own pocket to be part of it. But if you're a fan and you ever loved a sport, you know that isn't always the point. But you guys are living in a different era, because there's an opportunity to do something you love and to make a living at it and to realize your creativity and imagination through new businesses. Another fellow Hoosier and former Olympian, a guy named Tom Zupanzik, in 1979, he knew how to weld. And in 1979, he made ends meet by welding free weight machines and creating the first weightlifting gym on the south side of Indianapolis. And for the first time when I was 18 years old, I went and I pumped iron, which was like a radical thing. Like, girls didn't do that. Guys lifted free weights sometimes. But, people like Tom and my neighbor Ken invested their passion and their time, and not a little bit of their own money, into a life's work in sport. And if you guys are interested in doing that, you should think about it that way. Because for them, people who, Ken never made a living at it, but for Tom, things completely changed. He now runs marketing for the Indianapolis Colts. And Ken, who's retiring next month, can boast that a couple of his golfers have gone on to careers in sports, including the president of the IRL, who's one of his former golfers. I mention this to make the point, and if I haven't made it already, basically in the last 25 years, in your lifetimes, in my early adulthood, which is really depressing. And I want you guys to notice the type is huge, because when you're 44 years old, you won't be able to read the little type, so you make it really big. Sports entrepreneurship and the imagination of some crazy committed worker fans transform the possibilities of sports as a business and will continue to evolve and grow as the whole notion of the sports business going forward. All the stuff that's happening in the media and in technology, all that stuff is going to be a force multiplier and a game changer. And you guys can be part of that because of the education you're getting here. You're going to have a leg up because of the education that you're getting here. And when I talk about those crazy committed fans and worker fans, I'm talking about people like Jim, you know, and Phil Knight and Bill Rasmussen, who created ESPN and who everybody thought was out of his gourd. I mean, basically, he and a bunch of other friends, and I hope I have the story right. You probably will correct me, but the way I understand it is they wanted to watch away UConn games. And cable was just starting to come into its own. And they said, gosh, let's go get a license for cable so we can create you know, a station for UConn fans to watch away games because they couldn't get them. And when they went down to get the license, the guy said, you know, you could get a national license. You could make it, it costs the same amount. And so they said, wow, what a cool idea. And that's how ESPN happened. And, you know, these people were all, more than they were businessmen, they were dreamers and creators. And you guys need to think about yourselves as dreamers and creators. And because they were dreamers and creators, they transformed possibilities in the business of sports. I know that along the way people definitely doubted them or told them that they were nuts or that it wasn't going to work. But today, because of them, and of course because of the incredible athletes of the last 30 years, people like, you know, Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, and coaches like Dean Smith and Pat Summitt, we have been inspired as a society beyond, you know, the beginning of the 20th century to watch, to play, to cheer, and to participate. And all of those things brought together create incredible business opportunities. And, you know, in the case here at U of O, you guys have decided you want to make it a career choice. And you have to think not just about, I want to go work for that team, but you have to think about the whole sort of realm of how sports impacts people's lives and how you can be a part of that, because that's really where it's at. Today, new sports-related businesses, services, and products flourish or flop every quarter. And from what I hear, many of you guys are interested in being part of that ride. And it's a real adventure. I can tell you from having businesses that didn't work at ESPN that you learn as much from the things that fail as you learn from the things that succeed. And women's roles in sports have evolved too, I think. I believe success comes when you're well-prepared, you work really hard, and you get a little bit lucky. And I was really lucky and really ready 10 years ago when I was tapped for a new marketing spot at ESPN. The spot hadn't existed before. There were marketing people there, but I was put in to help launch the new businesses and to some degree to figure out new ways and new directions to go in. And, you know, people like Lisa Love over at Arizona State and Nona, you know, I mean, you'd probably agree. You worked, you were prepared, you worked your butt off, and you got lucky. All those things came together. You know, I think about Danette Layton. I mean, she's somebody who I just like watch her career and go, you go, you know, because she's amazing. All these women and all the women who are on the panels worked hard and knew when to fight. And I mean, I got to tell you guys, you got to know when to fight. You got to know when somebody isn't hearing what you're saying. You got to figure out 5 million different ways to say it so people finally hear it, because it's not enough for you to believe in it. You have to convert other people. So, you know, I think that it's funny when I talked to so many people when I was developing this talk, and one of the things people said is the young kids aren't fighting hard enough. They don't know how to fight. You guys, figure out how to fight. Put yourself in experiences that are going to teach you what your authentic way of fighting for what you believe in is. And do it while you're in graduate school or an undergraduate, because that's the practice ground for going out in the world and making your mark. You know, also for me and for a lot of women, you know, maybe most of them are younger than me, but people who are sort of in similar positions as I had at ESPN, part of our fortune, part of our luck was the time that we were born and the time that we sort of came into our own as young adults. You know, the social climate and individual courage of certain young women in the 70s and before, people like Billie Jean and people like, you know, the women's crew at, was it at Yale? I can't remember, at Yale, who did like crazy wild-ass things to make their point about Title IX. You know, they opened the field for girls and women. And young women got real competition at the collegiate level for the very first time. And because of competition at the collegiate level, girls in high school got to play. I mean, whether or not they went on to collegiate athletics, the point was they got to play competitively and have team experiences. And it changed what was possible on the professional front. You know, it wasn't happening then, but it changed the possibilities there. And I think that, you know, people like Val Ackerman, who was here last year, and her boss, David Stern, they made history by pushing the possibilities and making the first meaningful big league commitment to women's professional sports. But getting an audience, both in arena and on TV, has been, you know, a super long, hard road. And the WNBA has continued because of the talent commitment and flexibility of the ownership and the players. They aren't scared to change their business model to make it work. And I mean, think about that. Remember that. If you're climbing a rock and you don't have a new handhold and foothold to get to the next level, you have to push off the rock and shift over and find another way up. You have to change your strategy. So remember that, because just because what you think is the right way to do it doesn't work doesn't mean that there isn't another way to do it that will work. So I think those people are really inspirational because they want to make it work. They believe in it, and they're going to figure out how to change the model to make it live into its potential. You know, I think there have been incredible accomplishments in women's pro sports, socially, professionally, and individual. The quotient there is high. Great things have been done. But sustained achievement on the balance sheet has been rare. And, you know, yet at ESPN, we're still completely betting on women playing sports, okay, on ESPN. The interesting thing about it, and I think that there's a panel, isn't there a panel tomorrow about getting women to watch men's sports? The people who are watching women playing sports on ESPN are men. So I guess my question is, how do we get women to start watching sports? Because if we could change that, we could make a huge difference in the potential for growth in traditional mass media. You know, just to give you guys some sort of statistical information, the 2006 NCAA Women's Basketball Championship overall was the most viewed ever on ESPN. So it just keeps getting better every year. It's up double digits versus the men's on CBS, which was down 25%. And this all happened without UConn or Tennessee. So, you know, you think about the sort of dynasties in women's basketball, those people weren't even playing, and more people watched than ever before. It was up like 16%. And, you know, it did over a 5 rating on ESPN, which is outrageous. ESPN's average overnight rating is like a 0.98, just for comparison. It outrated the Masters coverage on ESPN. So that's a pretty formidable audience. And as marketers for products going out into the world, because you guys will get jobs working, you know, Visa and jobs working at Gap and jobs, that's a real audience there. So, you know, you should consider it as a good marketing platform because it's really, really strong. And, you know, the women's NCAA softball finals get great ratings year after year. They outrate the men's baseball. The LPGA and WTA are doing well, and more men watch, as I said before, those women's sports than women do. So there's this other factor there, and I don't know how much this resonates with you guys, but I've been reading a lot of research that says that young people consume sports media with a more gender-neutral approach anyway. You aren't really paying that much attention to whether it's a male or a female player. You're paying attention to whether it's competitive. So, you know, in this dynamic context, it's kind of difficult for me to make predictions about what's the next thing. But, of course, I'm going to take a shot at it. And I'm doing it to almost cheerlead you guys about what you've chosen as a career. Because there are a couple of factors that I believe are going to fuel opportunity, to use the theme of this conference, in women's sports and for women in sports going forward. None of this is the exclusive province of women, though. Anybody with a good idea who believes in that idea and can make it manifest and get partners and get consumers and serve audiences with it is going to win in this new context. The first point, though, is on a macro level, the market's really beginning to pay attention like they never have before in the beliefs, behaviors, and the dynamic expectations of women. And why wouldn't they? In the last 20 years, women's buying power has grown 63%, while men's grew less than 0.5%. So buying power is on the rise for women, and it's sort of just flat for men. So, of course, from a business perspective, you'd be crazy not to look at that audience and figure out how to serve that audience. And I think that you're starting to see this in retail a lot, too. There are a couple of different concepts right now targeting active women who are 25 and older. Things like, and I'm going to mispronounce this, it's called PAIVA, P-A-I-V-A. It's basically finish line, recognizing that women who are really active in sport don't like going to finish line to buy shoes. They want to go someplace where all the stuff is for them. They don't have to buy a boy's size large. They can like put the whole thing together, and they recognize that that's a powerful, market space. Now sounds like it's a similar kind of a business. Janeville, Martin & Osa, Chico's, and of course Nike Women. Those are all retail concepts that companies are placing their growth bets on. So there's obviously a lot going on in terms of marketers looking at the needs of women and trying to serve those needs. And of course, from a performance perspective, you have Michelle Wie driving from the men's tees, breaking records and turning heads. And, many employers are keenly interested in keeping women in the mix because women's separate experience is a great point of diversity for informing their business decisions. And all this bodes well for women's sports and women in sports. The next one really is media fragmentation, which, everybody in the traditional media business is like quivering, going, media fragmentation, oh shit, excuse my language. But the happy byproduct of fragmentation is a media-enabled fan or a media-enabled consumer. So if you just decide not to be afraid of it, you can figure out, okay, if I'm a media-enabled consumer, how would I want to be communicated with personally? Or, I'm one of 600 women in the city of Eugene who plays soccer 4 nights a week with my friends, and I have a friend actually who's in Portland who's like this. I'm 51 years old and I'm still playing competitive soccer. How do I aggregate that audience? Because those 600 people, if you could get to them, if you're selling something to them, it'd be very inexpensive marketing, okay? The media-enabled consumer creates a possibility that you can super-duper target and micro-fragment down to them with a meaningful product offering and make a lot of money off of them, frankly. So I think it's going to create a new business model for women's sports media for sure. And in a world with broader consumer adoption of broadband content platforms, VOD, even wireless video on demand, the potential to efficiently bring those fans together, the fans of things like women's lacrosse, for example, and to market efficiently to them, suggests the potential for a greater balance, a balance sheet performance. If you're not wasting a bunch of your media money trying to communicate to people who don't really care what you're talking about, and you're focusing it, you can be very, very efficient and stealthy and get a lot of cool things done. But it's going to take people like you guys. So you guys are the third factor that I want to talk about. You guys are the next in line. You guys are like people that I hired into my group at ESPN. And you're the next in line. You have to prove that you have the creativity and the will and the ability to fight and the ability to collaborate and to change direction when you need to. And you need to get those experiences now, and you need to continue to go into the direction where you're going to, frankly, be able to exercise your creativity for the first 5 years of your career to prove what you're capable of. It's going to take you believing enough in these possibilities that I've talked about, and in some cases, inventing those new possibilities. And you guys have already made the decision you want to make it your life's work, or at least for now you want to. So you're going to need to be flexible. You're going to need to determine, when you need to change course and what makes most sense. You need to be determined enough to really occasionally get in a fight when you have to. At ESPN, I remember the first fight I got into, and it was in a big room, and we were talking about hockey, and nobody was listening to me. And I was like, okay, I'm in a room where I am one of 3 women, and there are 44 guys in this room. It's a very big meeting. And I had these little red high-heeled shoes on, and I took one of them off, and I started pounding it on the table like a judge. And I don't know. We all have our authentic ways of communicating our separate selves. That was mine at that moment in time. But you know what? It made people laugh, and it made them stop and say, okay, what are you saying? And we all need to each find that authentic part of us. It isn't imitating me. It's being who you truly are. But, most of all, you need to be just completely, crazily committed the way that Jim was, and the way that Phil Knight was, and the way that Bill Rasmussen, bless him, was. And you need to be a little bit lucky, too. And I guess in closing, I just want to say I wish you all great things. So that's it.